So we're going to learn how to save seeds for things that we like to eat. And the easiest thing to learn, and something you're probably ready to do right now if you have a garden, is to save some seeds from your tomatoes. First of all, if you're going to save seeds from tomatoes, you might not want them to be from hybrid tomatoes. So you might not want to use ones that you have bought if you don't know exactly what kind they are, because otherwise they may not produce the same kind of offspring as the parent. But anyway, the best way to save tomato seeds is to cut open your tomato and scoop out the interior and let it go into a container that you can let it sit in and go rotten for a few days. Because being rotten is actually a good thing when you're a tomato that's going to give up its seeds. You'll find that some tomatoes have a lot more seeds than others. Very often the very meaty orange and yellow ones seem to be have a lot fewer seeds. These are just lovely. Oh boy, look at that. So what we do is we let this sit for maybe 4 days. Usually that's about the best time. And then we let it get moldy. And when it has a real white mold on it and doesn't smell very nice anymore, this is actually when the viruses that could overwinter on the tomato have been killed by the mold, which is one reason that you do this. And the other reason you do this is because, as you can see, every tomato seed has a kind of a slime around it, and that contains enzymes that prevent germination, which is why very few seeds germinate in the fruit. Most seeds have something to prevent germinating in the fruit. And when you ferment it, that slime kind of rots off, and the enzymes rot off with it, and then the seed will be much faster to germinate when you start planting them again in the spring. Usually around early April is a good time to start your tomatoes. So you don't need the skin. You can eat that part with any fleshy bits that are left. And so we're just going to put a lid on that and forget about it for a few days. And we can get back to you on our next session and show you how to strain it. So where did I put that lid? There's the lid. Okay. Bye-bye, tomato. Sit and get rotten now. Now, something like a squash, you don't need to go through that fermenting process, but it is a good idea to leave the seeds in the squash as long as possible before you plan to eat the fruit, so that the seeds are as mature as possible. You see, they're still attached inside to all the filaments in there, so they're still getting nourishment from that while they're in there and continuing to fatten up and accumulate strength, so that you'll get a stronger plant when you plant the seeds. Really, the trick with squash is more to decide which squash to save the seeds from, and also how to prevent cross-pollination among the squashes. Then there is a problem with preserving them. The main thing with seeds like this is to keep them away from the little mice and the other creatures that will consider them a real treat. Even a lot of people like to eat squash seeds, so you might have some hungry nibblers in your house, and you'll have to hide them. So you scoop them out and you let them dry. On newspaper is usually good in a sort of a warm place with good circulation. You let that dry for a few days. You can rinse them off before you put them in that drying process, but it doesn't really matter one way or the other as long as you spread them out well and remove any really big meaty chunks that'll tend to produce more mold than necessary. And but if you just rinse them under a tap now and spread them out, they will dry just fine. And you'll find that when they've dried, I would leave them for a couple of weeks anyway, 2-3 weeks. And then you will find that there is a sort of a cellophane-like coating that just flakes off. And I think that coating is where that enzyme that slows down squash germination is. So you can then store them in a jar. I use a glass jar for that because there's a lot of creatures that will try hard to get at them. And this is just so beautiful. So I'll just scoop that out. Scoop that out. And you know what you do with the rest of this lovely squash? I suggest we just have it for dinner. And that's all there is to it. But before you've gotten to this stage, you will have to recognize which fruits you want to save the seeds from. So we do actually have a picture somewhere of a squash flower. I think what we have is a zucchini flower, so that you can see what a male and a female flower looks like before it has set fruit. And the female flower has a sort of a squash or zucchini, or in the cases of cucumber-shaped baby fruit behind the female flower, in which the ovules that need to be pollinated are forming. The male squash flowers, which are usually much more abundant, are just on a single stem without a lump behind them. And you can tell quite easily which are which that way. Although there are other signs inside the flowers that you can look for as well. But actually with squash it's so simple, you really just need to look at the shape of the stem. And the thing with doing the pollinating is that because squash will cross-pollinate very freely among the same kind of squash. There's 4 kinds of squash. There's a couple of kinds of melons, a couple of kinds of cucumbers that can also cross-pollinate among themselves. So you might want to be sure that if you have the kind that you want to grow, that you don't let it get cross-pollinated by another similar variety. And to that end, we use these little muslin bags to put over the flowers, over the blossoms, the squash blossoms, or the cucumber blossoms, or the melon blossoms, before the flowers open. So the night before, if you see a flower that is ready to be opened, you can cover the female flower with the muslin bag and tie it up tight at the bottom. And you can also cover several chosen male flowers, preferably on another plant. But if it's the same plant, it'll still work to produce a fruit. But you may just want to make sure that you diversify their genetic inheritance a little bit by getting them to cross with the same variety, or to mate with the same variety, but a different plant. And then you take off the male flowers in the morning. Take off the male flowers and cut them off and open up the actual blossoms. And then take the bag off the female flower and transfer the pollen yourself into the female flower using the actual pollen that is now going to be abundant in the male flower. And after you've used up your flowers, and there's a lot of pollen in there, recover the female flower with this bag. And there is quite an extensive family of squash, so you'll have to learn about that. But anyway, these guys will cross with pumpkins and zucchinis and quite a vast range of very familiar squashes, acorn squashes too. Whereas this one here, which is a buttercup, is a moschata squash, and it will not cross with this variety, and it will also not cross with butternut. So if you wanted to grow butternut, buttercup, and little dumpling together in the same field, you could get away with that without having anything cross-pollinating, as long as there wasn't somebody right next door or fairly nearby who was growing a similar kind of squash in the same family. Some of the bees that do the pollinating on squashes might travel half a mile or so to get to a field. So if you're not sure that you can't keep other pollinators away, and you do need some pollinators, you just want them to pollinate locally. If you can't arrange that, then it's better to just use those muslin bags, and that way you have complete control. The day after, when the blossom is closed, you take this off, you mark your plant, you mark your fruit that has been pollinated. I would use something like a red ribbon around the stem near it or something like that, just loosely tied on to indicate which one it is. It's always a good idea to mark everything, and then you can just let the rest of the plant develop fruits at will, because you're just going to eat the rest of them anyway. You don't need to save seeds from all the fruits that the plant makes unless you want them for food. And so anyway, this is pretty easy. Put these away after they're dry. I think we'll cut open this eggplant now. I don't know if the eggplant has any seeds in it, because I would have left it on a little longer, but I'm going to cut it in half and see what we can find. It's probably a good idea to let your eggplant rot. Well, there are seeds. They're very tiny, and I don't know if they're mature enough to save, which is why I would have left it on longer until it rotted. But when you have a fruit that's nice and wrinkled and it's still on the plant, that's as much as it's going to develop. So at that point, I would then do the same thing. Let that fruit get rotten, scoop out the interior, and then treat it like the tomato. I don't know if the rotting is so necessary for these, except that it makes it easier to separate out the seeds. I think most of these seeds look too immature, so I'm not even going to worry about it. We'll just eat this one. And peppers are easy. They're wonderfully easy, because you really don't have to do anything much with them except cut them open and scoop out the seeds. Now this, I believe, is a sweet shepherd pepper, and there are the seeds, as you can see. And if it's a mild pepper, all these interiors are also going to be mild, and you can actually eat any of that, or you don't have to worry about it. And those seeds look ready. They're nice. Those are very nice seeds. And we'll just spread those out on a bit of newspaper, and maybe, I guess we'll use this serviette there. And the important thing when you're doing seed saving, of course, is to label everything, because I can't tell you how many times I have saved some wonderful seeds and either labeled them vaguely or not labeled them at all. And then I live to regret it. So the labeling needs to be done at the moment that you are doing this, and not later when you think you'll remember to do it. And these will dry very easily. In about 3 weeks they will be good to save forever. Probably less than 3 weeks, but if it's cool or humid, it might take a bit longer. And of course we're going to not waste anything. This is all food. It's wonderful, delicious food. And with these little peppers here, these are the hot ones. Please, if you are going to open these up, please wear gloves, because to get the oils from these on your fingers and then to accidentally touch your eye is very painful. It's actually easier just to let these dry as they are. They will dry very quickly and very easily. And sometimes people might plunge them for a few seconds into boiling water to get them to dry faster if you want to use a food dehydrator. But I wouldn't actually bother with that. You don't want the interior to heat up because you don't want to damage the seeds. And once they're dry, then you can just crumble them. Just crumble them up. And then you can have the seeds, and you can use the rest of it as well for cooking. So that's very easy. Peppers are the easiest. You might be wondering about things like beets and turnips. And maybe even you might be wondering about carrots. And the thing with beets and turnips and carrots is that they are biennial. And that means that in order to have them go to seed, they have to have a second year. So the trick is to get them to survive through the winter. You can dig them up and keep them in sand in your basement, or in a box somewhere in a cool place where they won't freeze solid. Or you can leave them in the ground if you have good drainage. It's important to have good drainage. Sandy soil works best for this. And then they will start to regrow early in the spring, and they will go about the business of producing seeds. Now, these are wind pollinated. Turnips and carrots are insect pollinated, but otherwise the approach is quite similar. And actually, we're going to give you a link for a really good site that shows how to do this very professionally. But even if you don't want to do it terribly professionally, you could just plant this around the end of February in a pot, and it would start to grow and go to seed. You could wait a little longer, but it's probably a good time to start because beets are cold hardy, and you could have them growing outside, either in containers or in the ground by April. So I suggest that you not be too in despair over the idea of this, because most people find it kind of intimidating to think about saving biennial seeds. But it's something that really has to be done because they're some of our best, most nutritious, most reliable vegetables. And we really can't rely on having seeds made available to us all the time. These are the seeds for a carrot. This is a Bulgarian black carrot, and I think most of these seeds will breed true, although there's a lot of Queen Anne's lace in the neighborhood, and some little insect might have gotten through. But I was trying to keep these under wraps so that they wouldn't get cross-pollinated, because I really like the idea of growing Bulgarian black carrots. Queen Anne's lace is the wild form of carrot, and the only problem with that is that even the roots tend to be a bit skinny, little white roots. But also there are some wild carrot relatives that are quite toxic, like hemlock. poison hemlock. So you want to make sure that you saw this plant growing through its life cycle, and that you noticed that it had the little black dot in the middle of the flower, which means it is really carrot rather than anything else. There's other biennial members of this family, of the Umbellifer family, that we use quite a lot. Some of them are annuals, like dill and coriander, and they're really easy because they go to seed very quickly. Some of them, like parsley, will go to seed the following year. It's also a biennial, like carrots. So you should know your plant before you decide to save the seeds, unless you have some special reason for wanting to save the wild seeds. And there are many good reasons for that. And I think we'll get into that on another day.
So we are going to show some photos of the different plants, and maybe Maria can also explain a little bit about different plants when we show the slide.
Okay. Well, we do have some wildflowers here because it's very important to remember to attract wild pollinators to your garden. Pollinators being mostly insects.
So this is the Black-Eyed Susan?
Yeah, the Black-Eyed Susan is very much loved by many kinds of bees and butterflies. And it's a very reliable plant that will grow almost anywhere it gets enough sun. It's not fussy about the soil, and once it's established, it will reseed itself pretty much forever. And, well, I think are we talking about the zucchini? Yeah, there's that zucchini I was talking about, where you can see the swelling of the fruit below the female flower. That is the young, that's the baby zucchini, not pollinated yet, or maybe just pollinated and just beginning to develop. The male flower has just a skinny little stem with no fruit behind the blossom. And you will find there's usually a lot more male flowers than female flowers. And those tiny little seeds that are on the, I don't know what's the magnification on those? These seeds are so small, they're almost like cinnamon dust. That they were obviously taken with a very good close-up. And Campanula rotundifolia is it's a biennial flower. And it will grow happily in a sunny field with Black-Eyed Susans. It's a very delicate flower, so it doesn't shade anything around it. And beautiful bluebells, and also much loved of many, many pollinators. And it just kind of comes back on its own in a non-invasive way, just in a kind of a, oh, I'm back, hi, kind of way.
Just want to give the scale. You saw we use the regular lined paper, so
yes.
the space between these two lines, you can scale the size of the seed.
Right, that's the way to tell the scale. That's because that's just like foolscap paper. And the thing with that seed is you have to sneak up on the plant to collect it, because the way the seed is dispersed, the bells turn into these little papery containers that are full of holes, basically. And every time there's the slightest vibration, the seeds are dispersed just through any little trembling. They will fall off. So you have to sneak up on this plant and then put a bowl or a big flat piece of newspaper or a tray or something right near it and push the plant over slightly onto that surface so that it will drop its seeds, and then they will just fall off like this lovely reddish brown dust. Here's the seeds for echinacea. This is actually Echinacea pallida, which is the more potent form than the Echinacea purpurea. And if you want to grow that, if you're going to grow echinacea, you should certainly throw in a few of these, because they are the ones that, when you get a 3-year plant, you can dig it up, chop it in half, and chop the root in half, replant the half that is that you want to save, and that you should do that in the fall, usually around this time of year. Well, maybe a little later into September is a good idea. Replant it and it will come back, but you will use the rest of that echinacea to make a tincture of that root, and you will then have medicine which is made from a root that is still alive, which I think gives it a little extra bang for your buck. Rinse it off well when you get it home. Smash it up with a hammer so it's thoroughly bruised, and then pour vodka over and forget about it for a few months. Now, these seeds of the echinacea are very interesting, because if you nibble on them, you'll find they have a really strange effect on your mouth. It's almost like at first a bit numbing and then a bit salty, and I wonder if they have potential as a seasoning. They're kind of interesting, but I don't like to waste seeds too much, so I don't usually eat them. But anyway, it's something to consider. And this is perennial, hardy, native perennial. So seeds like that need to be stratified in order to germinate. And in order to stratify them, what you do is you let them think it's been winter. And usually by the time they come up, it has been winter. But if the seeds have not been in the ground, you have to fake that for them by putting them in a Ziploc bag with some moist sand or cocoa fiber or something, and sticking them in the fridge for maybe, I don't know, 2-3 months. And then you can plant them up, and they will come up once they're sure it's been winter, because you can't risk coming up too early if you're a perennial plant. And this is seeds for Joe Pye weed, which is one of the most beautiful native perennial plants, which you can use to bring pollinators to your garden. This will be covered in lovely bees and butterflies the whole time it's in bloom. The flowers, which you can Google, are birthday cake pink, and the large flat inflorescences. They're just beautiful. The plant has medicinal value, but it is apparently rather tricky to use it medicinally, and I don't really have that kind of information to share. I think you need to go to an expert herbal healer to work with that plant, because it might be dangerous. Oh, well, those are the seeds for the Bulgarian black carrot. I guess we already saw those, so you'll just notice that the seeds that we have collected ourselves tend to be a bit bearded. They have bristles on them, which are usually taken off commercially sold seeds. So you can see what seeds really look like when they start out if you just grow them yourself. Because sometimes we get a bit of a sanitized version of seeds. That's a beautiful carrot, by the way, that one. Oh, evening primrose. I had advised that people collect seeds and plant seeds and collect seeds just for the use of the seeds. There's many seeds that are wonderful eating and that are also have wonderful benefits. Evening primrose oil, I'm sure you've heard of that. It's one of those oils that has all your right range of omega fats in it, and it is especially useful for various female complaints, as they call them. And all those fats are also really important for your brains. So it's good to save some. If you get a large plant like that, you can get up to a cup of seeds from one of the really large ones. Otherwise, few spoonfuls here, a few spoonfuls there, it adds up. And it's also a biennial. In its first year, there's only a rosette, which is edible. In the second year, when it makes that tall flower stalk, you'll be quite amazed by, again, how many wonderful things come to visit those flowers. There's your familiar marigold, and they're a great garden staple because they have an effect on from their roots. They give off a substance that seems to control nematodes, and some varieties of marigold are stronger for doing that than others. But they're also just a very pretty, reliable plant, and the seeds, as you can see, are formed just as the flower fades. You can break open that little cluster and there will be the seeds, half white and half black. And I think that part of that is considered a tail that they sometimes remove, but I don't bother removing or cleaning those kinds of seeds. I just throw them back in the ground and they come back easily. This is a seed head from a Welsh onion. It's very similar to most other kinds of onion seed heads. As you see, the seeds are little black dots there, and the seed head itself usually starts out as a white flower. Sometimes it's a bit pinkish or purplish, but it's usually white. And the onions that we usually use in our cooking are biennials, but there are many members of that family that are either annuals, or I'm not sure, they're just glad to grow anywhere and will grow as long as they can. Things like chives and garlic chives are also similar to that. They all produce beautiful flowers. And then we should talk a little bit about garlic too, where it looks a lot the same, except the so-called seeds it produces are white, or pink and white, and they're not really seeds, but they're actually clones of the plant itself. But they are also either edible or plantable. And if you get little things a little bigger than that, those little white pearly things from the top of garlic, they will take up to 3 or 4 years to form a full-size bulb, but then there's no stopping them. And so that's the onion family.
So this is the first of the series of the show. We called it Open Food, and Maria is a host for this series. And we are going to do more on the seed, different method of protecting seed and other relating technique and others and so on. So we thank you very much for Maria. And
thank you very much for being interested in food.
So next Wednesday, same time, we will have the seed, this Open Food show again, and see you later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.